All right. Well, Courtney, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. This is going to be really fun.
Yeah, I'm super excited to have you on the show. Everybody, this is my friend Courtney Mock from the Calamity
Hi.
Janes still.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. And we're definitely going to plug your band at the end of the show. So
Awesome. Thank
I
you so much.
appreciate you coming on. And why don't you tell me what happened to you?
Well, what happened to me is it kind of involves a couple people. It wasn't just me, but it more so has to do, I have two great kiddos, and it more so has to do with my daughter. I have two great kids, and my daughter is about to turn 12. And pretty much since the time that she was able to verbalize and talk and walk, we noticed that she was pretty special. You know, we all think that our kids are so special and great, and they are. She has some pretty cool abilities, and it's kind of a family thing. We're all pretty open about it, and about our experiences and abilities. And my grandmother on my dad's side was just straight out clairvoyant. She could tell you, you know, things that were going to happen. And there's so many disasters that she was able to avoid in life. She would tell you things, you know, don't do this. And then, you know, it turned out to be, oh my gosh, yeah, listen to her. That saved her life a couple of times and saved my uncle's life one time. When he was in the war, he did border patrol, and literally it saved his life. That instinct, that intuition, and some advice from her.
Wow.
And so, just come from a long line of storytellers and authors, and people who, you know, on the very low of the spectrum have just that intuition, that gut feeling, and on the high side have just really incredible abilities. And my daughter is one of those people. And so, you know, a lot of people that know me know that we've had, fortunately, like a lot of really tragic things happen. But my dad, and the reason why we started the band, the Calamity Janes, was to honor him. He grew up in the 60s and 70s, the music scene in Oak Cliff. And
That was a pretty good music scene back then.
oh yeah, so much. And we're really good friends with members of his old bands, and I love when they reach out to us and tell us old stories, and it's just really cool. But anyway, our dad passed, unfortunately, from cancer in 2009. And my daughter at that time was about 9 months old. And so obviously way too young to really have any memory or recollection of him, but he was really really special person. And we were all just so, you know, distraught and depressed. It's like, okay, guys, we have to do something. We cannot just lay on the couch and be sad. We should do something to honor him. And so
Absolutely.
yeah. And so really it was Arwen's idea. And I love to call her bossy. She says she has leadership skills. she totally does. But she was like, we were just singing in her kitchen one day and decided to do this band, and it kind of went from there. And our whole family is very musical, and we've had those music roots, and that's as strong as a lot of the abilities that some of us have. But my daughter was 9 months old when my dad passed, and it was a really terrible time. It just seemed like when this happened, kind of from that point forward, you know, it's just like dominoes. One thing would happen, the next thing would happen, the next thing would happen over and over. And it was like, oh my goodness, we can't get a break. But throughout all that, there was a lot of things that brought us comfort. And one of those things for me was when my daughter was, maybe about a year and a half old. We moved into this house, and we were on this front porch, and this house is a really great house out in the country. It's maybe about 100 years old farmhouse.
Okay.
It's out in the Mountain Peak area of Midlothian, which has a really cool history. And we're on the porch, and we had just moved in. The house is a mess, and Cheyenne is just barely walking and talking. And we set her down, and she's kind of toddling around. And she walks to the edge of the porch and looks at something, and we don't see anything, but she focuses on something and just starts smiling and laughing and reaches her hands up like this, like little kids want you to pick them up.
Yeah.
And she says, Poppy, Poppy, and is doing like this. Well, all of the grandkids called our dad Poppy. That was his like grandpa name, And so pretty much from that point forward, we knew that there was something going on. And a lot of people, especially in the paranormal community, acknowledge the fact that children, or maybe it's because you're so open, or we
Right.
don't really know that when we're young, we can pick up on things, or maybe things that are there in spirit form feel more free to connect to children.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, but she's almost 12, and she's still having these experiences. And so a lot of them, and most of them, have been really positive. Some of them have not been. We didn't stay in that house for a long time because there were some things hanging out in that house that were not necessarily good.
Did she come to you and talk about those things? And what did you guys
She
do
did.
to try
She
to deal with
did.
that?
Well, it was pretty rough. From the onset, this house had what we thought was great energy, and it's such a cool location, such a cool story. And it's located, I won't say the address, but it's located on a road called Bobby Smith Lane. Sounds so country, right?
Yeah.
But it's a great yellow and white, cute little farmhouse. And it's on like maybe an acre or two of land, but all the area around there is basically a bunch of land. However, across the street and kind of down a little ways, tucked off the road, there's a really old church and a really old graveyard. And, in the course of living there, I think some things, some spirits, or what have you, whatever you call those kind of manifestations, were attracted to her. And I don't know if there was anything, that happened at this location before we got there, or if it saw her and just was like a magnet.
Yeah.
But there were some pretty interesting and kind of scary things that happened in that house. She, was barely old enough to talk and say one or two words, let alone string a sentence together. And I vividly remember, and so does she. She remembers this. There was one Saturday morning, and we had woken up early and had a bunch of stuff to do, and we're in the living room with the news on, drinking coffee, and Cheyenne comes running out of her room, and is just pale white, and says, Mommy, there's a dead lady in my room. And a child who's only, she was, I believe, 2 at that time, maybe 2.5. I'm like, how in the world?
Do you
I've
even
never
know
heard her.
that? Yeah.
And that, sadly, that might have been her first sentence. So at that point, it was like, mama, dada, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
She had an event happen when she was just a couple months old, where she had a brain bleed. And it was kind of one of those things where it's like, they never could really get a definitive diagnosis. They thought that she had a stroke, which is so rare for infants to have stroke, but it is possible.
Yeah.
And she had a lot of left-sided weakness, and she was a late walker, a late talker. So, you take the average, little kid and their milestones, and all of Cheyenne's were pushed back. So, she walked at 14 months versus most kids are walking at a year or so. And a lot of her speech and a lot of her things were delayed. So for her at, 2.5, to be able to string that full sentence together and say, just so flat out, Mommy, there's a dead lady in my room, was just, mind blowing. It was just so wild. So um, we didn't stay in that house for too long. Um, I had a few experiences. Like a lot of older houses, the rooms are kind of all in a row.
Hmm.
Bedrooms are on one side, and all the other, rooms are kind of on the other side of the house. And um, at that point, we'd only been there a month or two when she said this, and we thought, wow, she's got a great imagination. But in the back of my mind, I was also thinking, oh man, remember that time that she very clearly saw, my dad and was saying Poppy, how could she have known that to say
Right.
Poppy? And so, but maybe a month or so after this happened, I was at the house alone one day. Cheyenne was going to like a little Montessori Mother's Day out kind of thing. And I was walking to the kitchen, and Cheyenne's room was at the far back left of the house, and there was an office, and then our room was the front bedroom. And I was walking into the kitchen, and out of the corner of my eye, I see a foot and a looks like a long white nightgown just go shoop right into her room. And it was like one of those that happened so fast. It's like,
You start
did
second
I,
guessing yourself, right?
did I
Because you're like,
see
did
that?
I really see that? Yeah,
Hmm.
I've been there.
Right. So it rattled me, but it's not something that I saw like full on, or, it's one of those things you could brush off and say, maybe you just are tired. Maybe you are not seeing, what you thought you saw.
Yeah.
But very shortly after that, she started to talk about the lady with red hair who hung out in her room.
Nice.
And this lady was a very sound like a very troubled lady. Her descriptions of her was that she had on a long white nightgown. She had long red hair, and she said that she had boo-boos on her, and described spots on her nightgown that sounded like it was, blood or something like that. And Cheyenne has a decent memory, but to this day, if you ask her about that, she'll go, "Oh yeah, I remember," and she can vividly tell you and describe exactly what that experience was like, and describe her to a T, and she remembers, and
Yeah.
she was 2, 3 years old,
So it was pretty
and
vivid memory for her then.
very vivid. And the other experience in that house was one night we were going to bed, and this house, such a great house, but in this house there was this weird button next to the outlet. Well, it turns out that this had been like a little call button type thing, and somebody older and in a hospital bed had been in that home and was being taken care of previously. And I don't really know what happened, but your mind can assume a lot of things. But one night, that button always bothered me too. But one night, we were going to bed, is really late, tired, and turn the lights off, and are laying there trying to go to sleep, and I'm almost at the point of falling asleep, and I feel this pressure on the bed next to me just go, you know, and this is, before I splurged and got a Tempur-Pedic, so this was an older mattress, and I mean, you could feel exactly like somebody sitting down next to you.
Yeah.
And I
Sure.
thought, okay, no, that's strange. And then a minute later, I feel it go like somebody stands up, and then I hear a cough, like a man's cough. And so Courtney didn't get any sleep that night.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but we didn't stay in that house much longer. We decided not to renew our lease, but we also had the opportunity to buy a short sale
Okay.
in Burleson, and that is when things got really wild, and
So the
especially
problems
with
didn't go away
Cheyenne's.
when you moved.
Oh no,
Your daughter has continued to experience things.
she has continued to experience things. She's had experiences her entire life, off and on, often with some big gaps. And where we are now, it's so funny. She describes it as just being so peaceful, and so the house that we're in now just has the best energy. And we've had no experiences, and it's just really a wonderful house that we're in. But the house in Burleson, do you have time for that?
Yeah, yeah, we are in no hurry. This you can tell me
Wonderful.
about as much as you want. Yeah.
Okay. So this is when things get really interesting. Um, at this point, we moved out of the house and the farmhouse in Mountain Peak, and we went through the short sale process, and also we're starting to look at flipping houses, and that was kind of like the in thing to do, and
Yeah.
really the uptick of a lot of people doing that and looking at profit and everything else. It was kind of the perfect thing to do in between music stuff, and for somebody who was already not in like a traditional uh, work type situation.
Right.
So my in-laws at that time um, gifted us an amount of money, and we went through the short sale process, and it's very competitive, but somehow we were able to purchase this really really great house in Old Town Burleson. And Burleson is a really really cool town, one of those cute little deep train depot towns, and it's really grown over the years. um, but we finally signed the papers. It's a long process to do a short sale, and we move in. And at this point, Cheyenne is about three and a half,
Okay.
and um, we move into the house, and everything is really good for a while. Um, and things kind of calm down, and we're ripping out walls, and we're tiling, and we're painting, and we're doing all these renovations because the short sale needed a lot of work. It was in bad shape, and so our days were, Home Depot trips and paint swatches everywhere, and things were kind of being worked at a room at a time. And as soon as we started to do renovations, I know a lot of folks, that kind of get interested in the paranormal, um, and experienced these things. It seems to center around when you start doing
Yeah, there's
renovations.
a lot of stories that start that way. They're like, well,
Yeah.
everything was fine until we started changing things around, or we
Mhm.
decided to take out a wall or something, and then the paranormal activity just goes off the chart.
Totally. And that happened. But it was never a negative thing. It was just kind of like interesting little things. It started out with things kind of mischievous, almost like a little kid. Things would go missing. Um, we would put something in one room and find it in another room, or not find it at all. And usually it was little small things, um, a carpenter's pencil, or a spare key, or one of Cheyenne's toys. And
But not
um,
anything scary at first, at least.
not anything scary. And as a whole, nothing was over the top except for this one event. But the very first thing that happened to me.
Okay.
In this house, it was a two-story house built in the 60s, cute brick house. Um, the area, though, Old Town Burleson, is a very, very, very old area, and there's really cool old houses kind of mixed in with newer um, subdivisions that kind of popped up in the 50s and 60s. But this particular area was very close to some of the older houses, and I'm such an old house person. Um,
Nothing wrong with that, man.
but
I love old houses.
I grew up in a house that was about 100 years old, and it was really really neat. But um, anyway, there were two bedrooms upstairs in this house and a bathroom in the middle. And one day I was in there. Um, I just put Cheyenne to bed, and I was in that bathroom, and it had at that time a pedestal sink, and was washing my face and everything. The downstairs bathroom was a disaster. The master bedroom was a mess. So we had our master bedroom in the adjoining room next to Cheyenne's, and in between that bathroom at that time. And so I wash my face and everything, and I go to grab the towel, and all of a sudden I feel this on the back of my
Nice.
pajamas. I had on just like a button down pajama top and pants, but the shirt was pretty long, and it felt like a little kid walked up behind me and went like trying to get your attention.
Sure.
I thought, okay, we're out of bed again. I got to put Cheyenne back to bed. She needs a glass of water. She wants another story, another song, as little kids do. Well, I got the sip off my face and grabbed the towel and dried it off and turned around. There was nobody there. And I thought,
Nice.
okay, that little stinker just ran back into her room.
It's
Well,
just
then
messing
I
with you.
noticed, yeah. Well, then I noticed the door was closed. I didn't hear the door open or close. And so I thought, okay. So I went to her room. She's passed out, sound asleep,
Good.
snoring even. This child, she gets so mad at me. She knows I was telling you this, but she's at times has snored like a truck driver from the time she was like 3 or 4. So anyway, that was the first time in that house I was kind of like, well, that's odd. It was
Yeah.
undeniable. It was, you knew a little kid, what felt like a little kid was right behind you tugging on the back of your shirt.
It wasn't one of those things you could just go, well,
So,
maybe I left it. Maybe I left the pencil in there. Maybe I was just distracted. This was
yeah,
something very,
this,
very visceral. You know what I mean? So,
yeah, very physical and visceral and very physical. And I mean, I literally felt that little hand in his fingers and thought for sure it was my daughter, and it wasn't. So, I kind of thought, okay, well, little things have been happening and now this. And so I just again tried to brush it off or just thought, well, maybe there's a little something hanging out. And when you're open to those kinds of things, sometimes things kind of, happen like that from time to time and you notice it and then you just kind of go about your day. But um, not long after that, um, we found out some things about the area. We've always, I've always, in particular, been a bit of a history nerd and really been interested in history and especially related houses and just Burleson was such a neat town and had such a cool history that I just kind of dove in head first. And um, I had a chair in the corner of our what was where we're using as a master bedroom, and Cheyenne came to me one day and she started talking about this lady, and it was kind of one of those little kid things where it's like, okay, is this like a show you saw or is it what is
yeah.
well, little by little and over the weeks as she kept talking about this lady, she's like, Mama, the lady in your room. And I said, do what lady in my room? I'm the only lady in my room.
Right.
And then the more I talked to her, she had been seeing this lady who was, she described it sounded like she was probably in her mid 60s, older clothing, sitting in a rocking chair and holding an infant. And Cheyenne said that sometimes she would have a very serious face, or in her words, kind of a grumpy face. And sometimes she would smile at her, but she never talked. She would just kind of look up at her, and Cheyenne would just, said she didn't feel really scared, but she knew that this lady maybe shouldn't be there, or and she kind of wondered why she was seeing her, but we weren't. And so we lived in this house for about 4 years, and Cheyenne, from the ages of 3.5 to 4 to like 8, saw this lady quite frequently, always in our room, and always with what appeared to be an infant and sitting in this chair. And
Interesting.
really interesting. And so, about the third or fourth time she mentioned this lady, I started to go, I wonder who used to own this land. And so, being really interested in history and in the area, I started to really dive in and research. And I had from the library and from, I put things on Audible and anywhere I could find material to research about this area in my spare time, just kind of out everywhere. And one day, Cheyenne walks past some of my, little table with my research material, and she goes, "That's that lady." And I said, "What? What do you mean, babe?" The the lady, frustrated that I don't understand. The lady in your room. Well, it turns out that the lady that she was seeing and the lady on some of my research material, we believe is a lady named Mary Renfro. Mary Renfro was the wife of Reverend Henry C. Renfro, who was originally owned the parcel of land where Burleson is. And I kind of wonder, well, why is she seeing this lady? Well, I think that she was kind of gravitating towards Cheyenne because she knew Cheyenne could see her and could interact with her. Um, and the more I learned about the Renfro family, they were really fascinating characters. Reverend Renfro was a very prominent Southern Baptist minister in that area. Him and his wife Mary are buried in the Bethesda Baptist Cemetery. He was kind of a controversial figure, and they befell a lot of tragedies. There's a lot of really sad things that happened to them. Um, Mary lived to be 66 years old, I believe. And some really sad things happened to them, and especially to her in her lifetime and her husband. Henry was very devout. He was very, very religious, and they would have these giant revivals in that area. They had a farm in what's now the Cleburne area, and the tract of land that he owned was a huge parcel that extended all the way up to what's present day Burleson.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he passed away when he was, and I don't know exact age, I want to say um, maybe in his 40s, 30s or 40s. No, he would have been in his, I believe, in his 40s. But he was on a cattle drive from his farm in what's now Cleburne to Fort Worth. And on the cattle drive, he contracted pneumonia. They were on the cattle drive in the rain, and he passed away from pneumonia. And 3 days later, his son, who's named Burleson, also passed away from pneumonia at the age of 25.
That's
So
terrible.
really, really sad story. And there was a lot of that back then.
Yeah.
And so Mary survived, and they had the two children, and the son Burleson passed, and then their surviving daughter built a really beautiful house right around the corner from the house that we lived in, and it's called the Renfro Clark House, and it's just beautiful. You can drive by it in Burleson, and it has this beautiful copper rotunda on the house, and it has the original fence, and it is
Oh, wow.
really stunning house. But I started to wonder, well, maybe if this is Mary, if she's holding an infant, who would the infant be?
Right.
Well, so I started to dig in more and research more. It turns out that their daughter, and I've got her name here. I've been doing a little bit brushing up on my research. Their daughter, Margaret Annette Renfro Clark, who built the Renfro Clark House. She had 4 children, and 2 of them did not make it out of infancy. There was a son and a daughter who both died when they were about a year old. So, in my brain, I'm thinking, maybe perhaps it was one of those
Yeah.
grandchildren that she was holding. So
It's interesting. So so you guys obviously don't live in that area anymore, right? You're saying you've moved since
we do
then?
not. We
Yeah.
do not. And what's interesting, we sold that house, and we really lucked out on that flip. A developer bought the adjacent property and put some very expensive houses, which really helped us out
Sure.
on this flip. And so we made a fantastic profit and relocated to Waxahachie after that for musical reasons and family reasons. And um,
But now you're in a good house and she's not having experiences here.
That's that's right. We've relocated, and even from Waxahachie, and now we're doing so great. And now she's old enough to where she's got the tools, and we talk quite a bit about what to do if something scary kind of invades her space, and
Well, has she
she
reached
knows
out
what
to
to
any
do.
other I know that's a scary thing because there's so many people out there that like we're talking about this and nobody knows what these gifts are, or how they work, or if
Mhm.
there's any way to verify they exist or any of that, right? I
Right.
firmly believe that there are people with these gifts. There are
Oh,
people
yeah.
who believe that there aren't, so have you reached out to any of the people who might be able to help her control this or develop it in any way?
I have. There is a wonderful lady, who practices something called Reiki, who, if you've ever had a Reiki session or studied
It's
anything
all about
about
energy
it,
management, basically.
it is all about energy and, everything's made of energy, right? So, it stands to reason if there's good energy, there's bad energy.
So
And
is she a Reiki master?
she is. Her name is Lisa. She's fantastic. And she helped me quite a bit when I went through something traumatic. And I never really knew much about it before. But, learning about it and having a Reiki session and having her come into my house at that time, I was a firm believer because everything changed after that. Um, she came in and brought a real sweet lady who was a medium and told me things that there is absolutely no possible way she could have known.
Mm,
And they helped me get some lingering bad energy in the house out.
good.
And yeah, and they really helped me quite a bit, and helped my daughter and told me some things to do for her. And now Cheyenne's doing so great. She's a different kid in this house, so
That's
we're
awesome.
doing really well.
It's good that she's got a safe place now to where she's not
Mhm.
having negative experiences and she can kind of grow up a little more normal and maybe work with someone who can help her develop those skills into something that she can control and use instead of
Right,
it using her, right?
right. And things happen still from time to time, but thank goodness, like you said, now that she's older and we have such a great relationship. I hope we always have the type of relationship where she can just come tell me things and we can keep those lines of communication open. What's really interesting is that we sold that house in Burleson that I was talking about, and the people that bought it put it on the market about 4 months ago. So it's interesting that they didn't stay there very long at all. So I kind of wonder, did they have anything happen?
Right.
So
When that
not a
happens,
long time to
sometimes you find
stay.
these houses that people claim activity and the house transfers ownership a lot,
Yeah,
like every couple
yeah.
of years that transfers ownership.
Mhm. Yeah, and oh my goodness, I hope it's nothing that we brought in, but like I said, things just kind of seem to follow us and specifically her around.
That's pretty
So,
crazy. Well, and if you ever decide you want her to come on the show, let me know.
yeah,
I'd love to sit down and have a chat with her.
perfect. She would love that. She's a fantastic kid, and where we are now, she is starting her own YouTube channel with mom's permission and
Yeah,
heavily managed by me because it's the world we're in. But she's starting to research and find some cool areas to scout, and with the premise of finding the historical stuff and seeing what experiences she can have there.
I'd love to
So
come on an investigation with you guys. That's actually something we're going to be looking at is incorporating a
yeah,
few investigations into this channel.
let's do
So
it. Let's team up.
absolutely. Well, plug
Fantastic.
plug the band away. Let everybody know where they can find you guys.
Oh yeah, for sure. So of course, there's my OG band, the Calamity Janes, and they're still rocking. You'll see me at shows, with them from time to time as it permits. But the new project is called Long Sunday Drive, and the name is just kind of a nod to things that nobody does anymore. And we are Americana and bluegrass,
Okay.
and we're a four piece, and you'll see us out there. So check us
Awesome.
out.
Do you guys have a website or a Facebook page or any of that?
We have a Facebook page. It's at Long Sunday Drive Band, and we also have an Instagram, and it's the same.
Awesome.
So
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your stories with us.
thank you so much, Rocky. This was a blast.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to stop the recording and we can just hang out for a second.
Cool. All right.